Thank you for being with us, and feel free to share with us about your work.
Okay. Hi everybody. I can't see you, but I'm going to imagine I can. So, if you had a chance, so now I can see some of you. If you had a chance to look at the wall, like as you come in on the left, my statement is there. I'm just going to tell you a couple of the sentences in it, though, just talking about my work broadly. So it says that my work explores the relationships that exist among humans, animals, and ecosystems, particularly in terms of the food chain, raw materials, and the human tendency to exert control over natural systems. So the show that you're looking at right now is more focused on the raw materials, but a lot of my previous work was more focused on the food system. And more broadly, I'm just kind of looking at humans and their impact and relationship with the environment, like our impact on the environment. And then secondarily in my statement, I am exploring what it means to be a human today, how we can live in the world responsibly, and what our obligation is to do so. So I'm not necessarily saying we need to be perfect or we need to do everything we can, let's say, to save the environment, or something like that. It's a more ambiguous exploration of like asking myself what our responsibility might be and what I'm capable of, and how the world got to be the way that it is. Before I was born, so many things happened that I had no control over. And so it's kind of looking more broadly at that. And then jumping back to the first part, humans love to have control over things, and we micromanage the world. And so I'm also kind of interested in that from even just a garden is a strong exertion of control over nature. We're selecting plants and we're weeding out plants that we aren't interested in having there, and that goes toward producing food for survival. And so that kind of brings me to if you step back even further, something I've always been interested in is how we as humans can survive. So what are the basics? We need food, we need shelter, we need some warmth, safety. So that's partly where I'm coming from when I make work about domestic spaces is our experience of shelter is really kind of advanced now, but that's partly why I'm thinking about that. So I hope that context helps a little bit. The Elements exhibition that you're looking at is specifically about the home or objects that we use day to day. And the way this came about was kind of thinking about our basic needs, and also how the entire planet contributes to those needs. So what are the materials that go into all of the objects that surround us, like our drywall and our piping and our flooring and the plywood that builds the structure of the home, or the basis of the walls, or that kind of thing. And also the objects that we furnish our home with, or that keep us warm and surround us. And so I started doing some research into what things are made of. I made lists, what are all the things that are in a home. And part of this came from becoming an adult and seeing more how things were built, and being kind of surprised at the chintziness of some aspects of building. It's a lot of it is kind of this facade. But so looking at these materials, what are they made of? How are they produced? And then making a list, and it's kind of surprising how many materials come up over and over, whether it's something as a neutralizer in a process, or something that is a good fire retardant. And of course, in the process, we use fuel to transport materials, to synthesize highly processed materials, etc. So I came up with this list of like 35-ish raw materials that are really not kind of like primary materials that go into our day-to-day abodes. And I decided to make one piece per raw material that, so the piece illuminates that raw material to some extent. It's based on research, but also subjectivity in terms of like what is interesting to me about that material, and maybe some poetics of a relationship in terms of like how it's made and what its function is, or something like that. And each of these pieces was meant to like be a wall installation that might go ultimately into a larger installation that has sculptural components as well. So I'm actually slowly chipping away at this kind of really big installation that would have 30-some drawings as well as some other sculptures and some other components. So one of the things I was going to pose as a question to you is just, and anyone in the audience, like what is a material that is in your home that you know where it came from and what it is? Just an example.
Could everyone hear the question? It was, what is a material in your home or in your everyday life that you know the source of, that you know where it came from, what it is and where it came from?
Well, I think wood would be a good example. And I think we all know where that comes from.
Yeah. So like that's a pretty obvious one because you can see the grain. It's made of one thing, more or less. Like yes, there's varnish on it. Yes, it's processed. And you don't know, maybe you know if it's oak or maple, or maybe you don't know. And maybe you don't know where it was grown. But that at least, there's like a clear relationship. Like, okay, a tree made this, we cut it, and then we put it in our home as structure. And actually one of maybe an interesting thing about elements is I decided to not do a piece about wood, but because the shelves represent wood as like such a basic component to everything, and so they're in every piece, or the wood is in every piece.
Yeah, I saw that. It's walnut.
Sorry, yeah.
It's the wood.
Very, very American wood. I think of it as American. But, and then what's something from the home that maybe you have no idea what it is?
Well, I know you mentioned drywall. I don't know what that's made of. Some people might, but
it's principally made of gypsum, and gypsum is amazingly fire resistant, and so that's the main reason that we do that. And then in terms of insulation, there's a couple more ingredients in drywall. I don't know these things off the top of my head, but it's interesting to look up, and there are tons of how it's made videos online. Like there used to be a show, was it just called How It's Made? And so you can find snippets on YouTube. And the factory production of things is fascinating. Like silk is in the show to represent the fibers represented there. And silk, like for a single thread of silk, there are typically about 30 strands of silk, like from a silk moth. So 30 tiny strands are woven to make a single thread, and then that is woven to make fabric, let's say. So, and when you think that each cocoon is this, like it's made, it's an animal, it's not vegan. If anyone out there is like hardcore vegan, you might be thinking about, like, oh, I wasn't really thinking about my clothes, like silk. But yeah, it's like a ton of silk moths are used to create, like from their cocoons, that fabric. And so I'm partly interested in kind of like showing reverence to these things that it's like, it's so amazing that we came up with how to do this, and that we like raise or harvest or mine these resources to kind of make these things that surround us every day. And I think it's just really easy to forget about that. So that's partly like what I'm doing for myself, is just like doing research and trying to feel like more aware of where the things that are around me came from. So I thought it would be interesting, hopefully, for you to hear about a couple of pieces, and just like how I went about deciding what to draw. The essence piece on the, like right as you come in the gallery, on the left is the crude oil piece that's kind of white from a distance.
It's gonna be the one back here, guys.
Okay, so that one was the first piece that I made in the series. And I decided to do crude oil first because I found it to be fairly inescapable that no matter what raw material I was looking at, it needed to be usually harvested somewhere and then maybe trucked somewhere and then processed with energy and then trucked again. Or it needed to be mined and again using energy. So it's like the trucks, all of our processing is using like oil or some kind of fossil fuel for the most part. And then additionally, a lot of our homes are just we're surrounded by synthetics, and a lot of those are petroleum based. And so I made that one first to kind of principally to represent the energy, but also like the prolific use of plastics. So I decided to depict all of the algae that originally formed the crude oil. So each of the little pen drawings is a distinct algae. There's not any that repeat, and those are kind of like precipitating down, like implicitly maybe in water, and then forming a sludge at the bottom that over a huge amount of time becomes our crude oil that we're harvesting from the ground. And so I highlighted the algae there, but I also, and at the bottom you see there's a brown kind of strata there, or like a strip, and I used actual crude oil there, so that's a pretty literal interpretation, and I rolled up the drawing and I just stuck it in a pool of crude oil and let it wick up through the paper, and I let it wick for maybe like a week or something, so it takes time to kind of go through the paper fibers. So I wanted that to be a little bit like gross and maybe unappealing, and then at the same time I wanted it to be kind of this magical substance, because like think of all of the things that it's provided us. It's so amazing and so useful. And so it reminded me of when you are like walking in a parking lot and it rained, and then you see like a rainbow oil slick on a puddle, and you're kind of aware that that is from oil and grease and pollution, and at the same time it's just gorgeous. And so I wanted to create that effect on the drawing. So if you look at it later, like from an angle, you can see that it has this kind of rainbow flick in the center. And so that's trying to represent like the positive qualities of the oil and the actual kind of like process of making it over time, as well as maybe like the darker side of pollution that comes from it. So that's one piece I thought I would talk a little bit about. And then if you kind of turn opposite that, so it looks like you're probably facing it from where I think you are in the gallery. Toward the right is the tin piece. The tin one has like a patterned ceiling in perspective with water.
It's going to be the far right on this wall.
Yeah, thanks. So that piece, tin is interesting. So in terms of like its use in the home, some obvious things like the tin ceiling, that's not in use anymore, but in older buildings, if you see that decorative stamped tiling in a ceiling, that's usually, a tin ceiling. Or kind of in a decorative way in the Southwest, you might come across like a tin lantern. But also tin is used to make PVC pipe, which is really used widely for so many things now, but for piping, like flexible piping. And then also when we make glass sheets, you know how our glass is really like perfect and even now, like unlike old glass, if you kind of see like an old house, then how the pane kind of varies in thickness. So the way we make that perfect sheet glass is by running it over molten tin, and the glass floats on molten tin, and then I guess they have a cooling process. It's really cool to watch. It's kind of like, because it's in it first and it's able to move and it's sort of flexible, and then the glass sheets get cut. I recommend watching videos on it. But so that piece represents some literal aspects of what we use tin for in the home, but it also represents the mining operation. In Indonesia is where we get a lot of our tin from, and there are quite a lot of unsanctioned, but kind of like, so they're illegal mining operations, but the government kind of allows them and turns a blind eye because they're making really good profit on the tin, and the way that the tin is being mined is really unsafe, and people end up dying because they're diving. We harvest it from like kind of seafloor and pull it out of there, so they end up vacuuming up the seafloor, but these divers are kind of unprotected and they're just diving down to these shallowish depths, like 30 feet, and taking turns harvesting the soil to pull the tin out. And so it's trying to represent the mining operation down below, and then the PVC is holding up a sheet of glass, and the glass is meant to represent a glass ceiling. So it's the actual literal glass, but then a glass ceiling that separates kind of like the poor from the wealthy in that case. So the tin ceiling is kind of ornate and nice up above, and it has a lantern coming down, so it kind of creates a table space, but it's meant to be a glass ceiling. So you're getting this divide of like who's providing this material and then where does it end up. So that's kind of, some of those are more literal and then some might be more poetic. Like I'd say gypsum and lead are a little bit more subjective, poetic, but still based on research. So I was gonna let somebody from the audience pick a piece for me to like further elaborate on, like I just did for tin, if you'd like to pick one.
Anyone have a piece they'd like Laura to unpack for us? Yeah, so they're asking about
The iron.
is iron.
Yeah.
Iron. Okay. So iron was a tricky one because it's so, like, it's universally used, and it makes steel. Like, steel is everywhere. It's like the structure of everything. And it was also really interesting because some of our earliest steel came from meteorites, because so we have evidence of like very early human populations using iron from meteorites to make things because it was accessible on the surface. And so the kind of like crazy, and yeah, so that's like a supernova, but that's representing like the iron in the atmosphere or in the universe sort of that we received in this kind of like cosmic way, but also the earth is full of it. So yeah, that was something that I just became fascinated with, that we were using this iron that came from out in space, and they can chart it based on the kind of chemical or like the molecular makeup of it. But then there's also a blueprint in that piece, just very kind of implied with white line, that's meant to be a floor plan to the house, because I was trying to conceive of a way that it could be manifested throughout the home. And the other fun thing is like the cyanotype is what we used to use blueprint, it's like the iron is what makes the cyanotype blue. If you're familiar with the cyanotype, it's a photographic process that's quite old, and you coat paper or fabric, and then wherever it's exposed to light, it turns this deep blue color, and when it's rinsed, the iron oxidizes and becomes blue. And so we used to make all of our blueprints with iron, essentially, and I thought that was a great kind of thread that kind of brings it together, where it's like the planning of something like a home or the building or the bridge is like also embedded with iron, and then the iron is kind of everywhere in structural strength. So that's part of it. And then of course it allowed essentially the Industrial Revolution, and I used the train tracks to represent this sense of progress. So iron was just such a big thing to try to represent, and I thought that the train, which is sort of like our symbol for moving into the Industrial Revolution and moving things around and like having set time, having standardized time and all of those things kind of like fits with the significance of iron. So I had to set a timer and I forgot, but we're probably at about 20 minutes, which is how long I intended to just talk at you. And so I thought I would field questions for the rest of the time.
Questions?
Why did you choose the shape of it for your pieces with the round and top?
The round shape. That's what you asked, right?
Yeah, the shape of the paper.
Yeah. So I spent quite a while drawing shapes, and I had at the back of my mind that I've always really liked the pre-Renaissance or proto-Renaissance pieces on panel that represent like the Madonna and various saints with halos and that kind of thing. And I intentionally wanted these to be somewhat altar-like, because to me, this is kind of what I care the most about. Like, I've always been sort of obsessed with humans and their impact, and like I have a lot of reverence for the planet and like the animals that we get things from. And so I'm trying to show that by referencing religious imagery in form. And yeah, I just thought there's also quite a lot of use of that deep blue in the pieces, and there is some use of gold and like shimmering, if it makes sense for the piece. So part of that is kind of thinking about art history and maybe with religious representation. Other questions?
Which one do you feel is most widely used?
Which material?
Yeah. Did you?
Probably crude oil I don't have data on that, but I would assume that that's the case. And then they're all pretty widely used. The fibers might be different, like wool probably is less, wool and silk are probably harvested less in weight or something than like steel or tin or like our gypsum. And like limestone is used so prolifically for neutralizing things or like balancing solutions, or it's like a filler, it seems, in a lot of things. So
I had a question for you.
okay.
Could you talk about, as you're doing all of this research, has your lifestyle changed? Has how you interact with your world and your environment and in your home space changed based on the research you've done for these artworks?
I think that there's an aspect of doing this research that makes me grateful. And I think I was grateful anyway, like grateful for objects. And I know like so often you're like, I think people are focusing on, being grateful for people. And I of course am on board with that too. But I think maybe I'm like rooting for the underdogs here that like can't speak for themselves. And so I definitely, like, there's something about like being surrounded by objects and thinking about where they come from that I really value, and I think that that makes me appreciative in my day-to-day. And I am really like careful about what I try to do research on where it comes from, and I'm sort of at this place where sometimes I make choices that I don't feel great about, but at the same time it's like, so I have this kind of rule about quality of life that it's like, try to do your best, but at some point you need to like be reasonable and maintain a quality of life. So as a young person, I was really obsessed with environmentalism, and I felt really despairing about like how humans just seem to like not think about what they're doing all the time. And it was something that I kind of was important to me really early. But by the time I graduated from college, I was pretty bummed about all these ideas. And I actually went to New Zealand as a pair, and I lived with a family there that were hardcore environmentalists, and they lived off the grid, and they're actually like slightly toxic in their thinking, in the sense that they are like trying to make a space where they could be totally self-sustaining if the world, you know, went to shit. So so living with them was really helpful though, because they made intentional choices that were really like environmentally sound and thoughtful, and yet they also were practical, and like they did have a car, they lived in a rural place, they used the car to get around, and like they've kind of made choices, and they have this ethic of quality of life as like part of their mission. And so that was really helpful. When I came home, I felt more hopeful and just like, okay, do what you can, try to be proactive, but don't just like despair about things, because that doesn't do any good. So I actually made a resolution in grad school to try to make constructive art, because I had been making kind of depressive, like despairing art, and then that meant that I was just in my studio like bummed about the world and what I was making. And now I am trying to do something like productive, whether that's for myself, like doing this research is productive for myself, and maybe it's productive for other people too. But I'm also trying not to like force my ethos on people, and so I'm trying to present things in like an acceptable way, and maybe an interesting way, but not like a negative light. So I don't know if that answered your question, but it's like, yeah, I do try to, I think like the things I think about enter into my life and my art in kind of a cycle.
Anyone else?
Other questions?
Got time for like one more. All right, I guess we're good. Laura, thank you so much. We have appreciated your work, and we appreciate your time, and thank you to everyone for bearing with our technological challenges. Laura, I'll let you go.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.